I love talking to ladies about feminine energy, and especially how much our culture is in the masculine right now, and opening our eyes to coming back to our own center, which is where we find balance and fulfillment and how we live more purposeful lives. I just did a really fun event a couple weeks ago, and one of the ladies said, well, how do I accept the feminine? How do I actually bring this into my life? I thought that was a great question. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What are the steps that you need to take in order to truly bring feminine gifts into your body and into your relationships and into the way you live life, because they are going to bring a lot of balance and flow and ease to you. And I'm also going to make sure you know the gifts of the feminine. So you're going to leave here having this beautiful idea of the tools that are already in your tool belt that you probably just were not shown how to use. I want to be that for you. I want to show you the magic tools in your tool belt. I'm Michelle Baker. I'm the owner of Embodied Art Studio. I'm an art therapist, and most of all, I'm an advocate for women living purposeful, creative lives, expressing their true self by embodying the feminine in a way that is just right for them. How do you learn to accept the feminine? How do you honor feminine energy gifts, especially when we live in a culture that is predominantly masculine and tends to only value those qualities of the masculine energy? To truly accept and bring in feminine energy, to get to play with and embody the fullness of feminine energy gifts, there is a certain process that needs to happen. And the first step in that journey is to actually know what feminine energy is in comparison to masculine, and especially to know and understand what the gifts of the feminine are. So let's talk about that first. Masculine energy is doing energy. It's very direct. It's purposeful, it's linear, it's logical, it's left-brained, and feminine energy is being energy. It is creative, it is more random, it is flowy and holistic and more intuitive and in tune with the rhythms and the sync of life. Neither of these energies is stronger or weaker than the other. They work together. They are just two halves of a whole. And remember that we all have masculine, feminine energy within ourselves. It's just that as a woman, you are predominantly made up of feminine energy, most likely. So if we are living predominantly from masculine energy, it's just hard on our system. And it also is forfeiting the gifts that we have from the feminine if we turn, too much into the other realm. This is my favorite part. What are the gifts of that feminine energy, that receptive being mode that does tend to be more subtle than the efforting, doing realm of the masculine? Intuition is the first one. Intuition is the feminine wisdom, whereas masculine knowing is the rational knowing. It's more like I'm going to go out and research and come up with some statistics and make a decision. The feminine way of knowing is feeling inside of herself and also being in tune with her environment and nature and having a wisdom that comes from a different place. Intuition is really just an ability to listen to your heart or your gut and trust that it knows what it's talking about. Another gift of the feminine is being able to follow what wants to happen. So the masculine likes to have a plan that is set out and linear, kind of step by step, and just follow it. And that makes masculine energy feel really competent. I'm checking off the boxes and walking down the ladder. The feminine is able to feel into what wants to happen and follow that, sort of like a river, the way the water just happens to work with the rocks and go with on the path of least resistance. Another great example of this feminine gift is in creativity and expression. Because if you've ever made art, you know that part of you is doing it, but a big part of art is allowing it. There is something that wants to happen and you respond to that. Like, oh, I don't know, it just feels like it needs more blue over here. So that ability to listen and trust is one of the gifts of the feminine. Along the lines of trust is another beautiful gift, the ability to sit with the unknown. Ooh, this is one that we are not good at in our culture right now. And yet imagine, bring up the image of the wise woman in the tribe, right? Like go back, 200, 300, 500 years to like the small tribes we used to live in, and the wise old woman who can sit back and she just knows that things will change. She just knows that something's going to happen and she doesn't need to know what. She can sit back in her own ability to hang with life. And there's a trust involved in that process that we are severely lacking at this moment in our culture. Another gift of the feminine is that she is like the queen of the emotional realm. She is really able to understand and be with emotions within herself, within her children or her partner. This is really where the feminine can shine, and it brings in another one of her gifts as well, the gift of presence. Because if you remember, masculine is the doing mode and the feminine is being. So the gift of beingness is to just be able to be with someone when they're having sadness, when they're grieving, when they're angry. This comes up for me with my own daughter, where no matter how intense her emotions are, I know that my job really is not to fix it, but to just hold her and allow her to have her feelings and to breathe with her and maybe regulate myself so that she can benefit from that in her own nervous system. That is a huge, beautiful gift that is just so much more subtle than, here, let me fix it. Let me go, solve your problem right now, which is where the masculine really wants to come in and shine. And of course, being an art therapist, one of my favorite gifts of the feminine is creativity. It's that receptive mode, that beingness that the feminine is so good at, that allows her to have inspiration come in, that creative spark. It is a receptive place that happens. The actual process of creating art is both masculine and feminine, and that's when they come together in a beautiful way to create something lovely. But the initial place of the idea and the desire to create is feminine energy gift. And because I own an art studio, I hear from people all the time, oh, I'm not creative. And so I really want to say this to you, that is another way that we have just gone too far into the masculine in our culture, that we have convinced ourselves that we're not creative and really pushed that gift away. So I want to remind you that creativity comes in so many forms that there is absolutely no way you're not creative. And I really invite you to bring that back into your life. So let's talk about how we do bring these beautiful feminine gifts into our lives. As I said, step number one is we have to actually know what they are. So now you have a better sense of feminine energy, the way that it feels, and take the moment to notice that it is more subtle than the masculine. So the next step is going to be a little bit harder. Step number two is you have to value the gifts of the feminine. And so because our culture has been so masculine focused and we've placed all our value there, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to turn and really truly value the gifts of the feminine. Now, here's one great thing. You don't have to only value them and now push away the masculine. So that's great news, because that That doesn't help anybody. Let's take intuition for example. It is common that in your day you might have an intuitive knowing, which isn't always about what's going to happen in the future. It's also, intuition is just listening to your body and what it wants. And so when those arise inside of you, and then you have a thought, well, why should you check your phone right now? Or why don't you like that person? That is your rational mind, which is that masculine energy coming in. And so we tend to dismiss the intuitive knowing. That is a way in which you are not valuing the feminine. So it takes a lot of conscious effort to say, I actually want to choose to turn towards this knowing and listen to it, even though it's not rational, because that's not what intuition is. And really honor that knowing and follow through with it. When it comes to the gift of being able to sit with the unknown, it requires you to develop a tolerance for discomfort. Again, not something we are taught in our culture, and yet that is the tool that will help you really be able to sit with not knowing. In addition to that, I would add in learning to trust, really getting connected to what do I believe in and how can I lean into that and trust it more and allow myself to be held up by what I believe. Another thing that can work well for this is to call on your inner wise old woman, that archetype of the woman who just knows, the patience that she has, having lived a long life, really calling her in because you already know her somewhere inside of you. She can really help guide you in moments where sitting with the unknown is the best thing that you can do. To really honor the beingness of the feminine, you have to start to live your life differently. We tend to be do, go all the time. So you're really not giving yourself the opportunity to just be. And we've labeled like that as being lazy and not productive. And so you have to rewrite those stories and really honor the fact that you need time for beingness. And let go of the idea that it's doing nothing, because that's not it. So what helps me is to call it a receptive mode. You have to be in a certain state of relaxed, calm beingness to actually be able to receive. That would be receiving that creative spark. It could be reflecting, like just really getting into that place where you're journaling or meditating and thinking about your life and getting connected to that big picture. Let's go back to my favorite. Because the feminine is creative, it really helps you to own that gift by giving yourself time to be creative at least once a week. And again, remember, this can look so many different ways. And it might help you to think, well, what inspires me? What gets me in the mood? And start there, and then give yourself the time and the space to allow creativity to come from your inspiration. So if the first step is to know the gifts of the feminine, and the second step is to learn to really value them, then the third step is to carve out space for them in your life. And especially because the feminine is that being receptive mode, it really does need to be scheduled in, because otherwise our obsessive doingness will just take up all the time and all the space. There is a discipline involved with bringing this into your life. It requires consciousness and mindfulness and literally making it happen on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. But remember, you don't have to do it alone. And that's another gift of the feminine, is the feminine is really relational and connective. And that's what I love to do, is bring women together to connect over these topics. So a really easy next step for you would be to come and join my Facebook group, Reclaiming the Feminine, so that you can connect with other ladies and work on the consciousness that's required for this to stay top of mind until it becomes more automatic. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope that it has given you some important insight. Honestly, learning the gifts of the feminine has been one of the biggest changes that I've ever made in my life. So I really hope that it's impacting you even half as much as that would be awesome. And make sure that you subscribe to this channel because I have a lot of content coming out consistently, and I think that there's going to be more that you're going to like.